Hey everybody, Dr. Mike here. I want to talk a little bit about this Kenworth Motors case study. Offer a few of my own remarks based on my experience and the questions in the book. I've gone through all of the posts so far and noticed some very good ideas. Some of you were saying athletic activities and icebreakers and outside professional speakers and so on. For those of you that got into the design of the retreat itself, as far as the intervention. Also, the comments about the um, preparation and so on. So let me go through each of the questions and I'll comment on them from not only the academic perspective, but from my own personal experience, because this case study is classic. It's just, that's probably why it's so early in the book. It's just classic. This is a typical OD type intervention. And as the OD consultant, and some of you some of you refer to, well, the OD would do this or that, or the OD. Yeah, it's the OD consultant or the OD practitioner, because to be correct in your English, to say the organization development did this or that. No, it's the OD practitioner. So for those of you who used OD and then didn't put practitioner or consultant after it, there's a tip. We want to call it the consultant or the practitioner. Okay, I've got the questions on screen right here to my right, so I'm going to take a look. The first question says, how well did the OD consultant prepare for the meeting? What would you have done anything? Had you done anything differently? And many of you commented about learning more about the company. And I would say yes. First of all, that's primarily yes. Learn more about the company. The way the case was presented, the fellow, he just decided, okay, I'll think about it later. I'll think about it on my drive from Spokane to Seattle, and that's about as much as he did. But these days in the digital world, you could learn a lot about Kenworth Motors by Googling it, right? Going to their website, browsing the site, find out what's their past history, how much money are they making, learn as much about the company, Google the names of the people you may be visiting, find out as much as you can about Denton and how long he's been there. Anything that you can find out. You're getting ready to go into a situation where that could be profitable. They didn't say in the book, but I charge about $4,000 to $5,000 a day for some of these interventions, the type that was described here. And depending on the company and situation. But 4 to 5 a day is not unusual, and certainly $2,500 a day for this kind of an intervention, a retreat, is about right. Not to mention things that can happen before the retreat, and I'll get to that in a minute. So how well did he prepare? I don't think he prepared well at all, because he didn't take the time to learn about the company. And there was lots of opportunities in the digital world to learn about the company. So that's my response to that. Whenever I get a call from somebody, I immediately go to the company's website. I Google the person who called me. I do everything I can to go, what in the world is this company all about? Are they profitable? Are they doing well in terms of the marketplace? What's being said about them? It's as if you're a physician and you're going to see a patient for the first time who has records, patient records. Wouldn't you want to look at the records? Well, of course you would. Okay, the second question is, in the discussion between the OD consultant and Denton, what was effective and ineffective about the consultant's behavior? Well, they had a good discussion. I mean, there's a lot of, it's like when you meet anybody new. In the OD world, all the small talk is important. Trying to get a feel for this person. Who knows, you might be doing executive coaching with this person, your client. So understanding the client and helping the client understand you. It's not just about you walking in and saying, oh, well, I'm the OD professional because I have a degree in OD and you've called me here and therefore I'm the physician and you're the patient, so sit down and let me diagnose you. It doesn't work that way. This is a two-way deal, folks. So it's as important for Denton to learn about you as the consultant as it is you to learn about Denton as the client and trying to understand what's this guy all about. So on one hand, the remarks about the office and where the office was and the walking through the doors and meeting the upfront attendant or whatever they call it, receptionist, then back to the secretary. All that is classic. I've done that 100 times, more than 100 times over the years. So that's about right. Going in and meeting him, where the conversation kind of got a little off track for me was that the the consultant didn't really have the words to describe what it is that he wanted to do, because I don't think, excuse me, as presented, I don't think he had a plan of action. It doesn't mean that he has a full-blown agenda, but he needs to have some kind of a plan of action. So getting back to the question, what was effective and ineffective about the consultant's behavior? I think as far as developing a social or interpersonal relationship, that's fine. What was ineffective was really getting into the entry and contracting phase. The entry phase is entering into the relationship and getting clear about what was going on with the organization. He could have asked far more questions, diagnostic questions of Denton to learn more about the organization, but he didn't. So for me, I would have been asking more questions, and also about Denton himself. Maybe Denton's just a little bit worried himself about something there's nothing to worry about. Then the issue is not the organization, it's Denton himself. So maybe it's a coaching intervention with one person rather than a retreat with everybody else. Okay, the third question, how effective was the contracting process described in the last part of the case? What is the scope and clarity of the agreement? Well, it's not very clear. The scope and how long it would last and what it was all about and what it was designed for. The idea of a retreat is certainly a good idea. There's more than one way to skin the cat. So is a retreat a good idea based on what Denton was saying? And if I could rule out it wasn't Denton himself by asking questions such as, you know, how is it that your assumption is that something's wrong out there and you can't put a finger on it? Could that be you? How are you contributing to your own feelings and what you're noticing? So let's rule out Denton as the problem and just say, okay, a retreat is in order. What was missing was a little more information, as alluded to in the case, about what would you do with this retreat. And I can tell you, one of the things that the authors kind of didn't allude to, but is common practice, and I've used it for years. If I wanted to request a retreat, I'd say, all right, so maybe a retreat's a good idea. What's the agenda? My response is, I don't know, but you do, and they do. So the way I would handle this is, and he alluded to it in the case study, is I would suggest, let me talk to your managers. He had a handful of managers that worked for them. I think it's appropriate to have a retreat with him and his managers. Let me talk to the managers either on the phone or, well, probably on the phone because I live in Spokane and they're in Washington, in Seattle. So let me do this. Let me have a half-hour phone conversation. And the purpose is to introduce myself, to get to know a little bit about each of the managers ahead of time, and to co-create the agenda. And co-create is the key word here. Co-create communicates to the client, I'm not the expert here. You are. I'm not the one who's going to come in from the outside and say, oh, well, based on this little bit of information, I'm going to stand up in front of you and yak all day, or I'm going to cause you to do activities that I think you should do. That's a good way to shoot yourself in the foot. Co-create the agenda. That means call these people ahead of time, including Denton, and say, what's important to you? If we have 2 or 3 days, I think it was 2 days, 2.5 days, Friday night to Sunday midday. If we have 2.5 days together off in the wilderness, what do you want to talk about? What's important to you that is either meaningful to the organization, but meaningful to you? So take an interest in each of those attendees personally, and you'll make some really good progress because they then feel like, hey, this guy's taken an interest in me. This guy, meaning me, and I know if you're a lady out there, then this woman is taking an interest in me. So either way, I'm speaking from my perspective. So this guy's taking an interest in me. I like that, and we're going to spend some time together, and he's interested in what I think is important. So now you're putting the emphasis on the design of the retreat back in the hands of the people who need to be the designers, and that's them, with your guidance. So that would be one of the things. I would say to Denton, you know, the agenda, what are we going to do? Because he kept asking, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And that's a typical kind of question based on clients who are kind of anxious and eager and worried and afraid that they're going to bring their people to the retreat, and people are going to walk away going, that was a waste of time and I hate you. So yeah, your client's going to want to know, what are we going to do? My answer to that is, what do you want to do? and what do they want to do, and let's co-create an agenda. Let's get clear about what we want to do. But for me to tell you what you need to be doing is crazy making. For you to decide, and the way we gather that data up front is pre-retreat interviews. They don't have to be long, 20 minutes, 15 minutes. Allow me to understand what's important to the attendees. Then I will create an agenda and send it back to you as a proposal. That's the other piece that was missing. There was really no contracting. There was no formal proposal. Typically, the way we do it in the industry, we go in, we have a conversation, we get some ideas, we say, okay, let me do this. I'll get back to you with a formal proposal and contract. And that's called entry and contracting. And that was missing in the case. So what I've done in the past, I say, I've got some good ideas. How about this? You've got some ideas. The attendees will certainly have ideas. I'll interview them up front, person to person, if we can, if I'm in the same city. If not, I'll contact them. We'll have a phone conversation. I'll put all these ideas together and roll them into an agenda, add some activities of my own that I think will be important to ensure you get what you want out of the retreat. And then I'll send it to you as a proposal that will include my fee and all that type of thing. How's that sound? And Denton goes, that sounds great. When can I expect the proposal? And I say, I'll have it to you within 2 or 3 days. The proposal. And then after that, the proposal will include the interviews. So I think I said that backwards a minute ago. The proposal up front, the contract will include the ideas of getting into the organization and calling the attendees and getting the information. And then the proposal will include that, plus the development of the agenda and the delivery of the workshop, to include any materials. And I might have to include and build time for my materials if I have to develop things that I don't have. I might have to develop some materials that we use. Yeah, I think that's it. So the contract then comes back to him and says, here's what I'm proposing. I propose to contact all these people. I will find out what they need. I will put that into an agenda that is approved by you and them before we meet, so that when we show up for this retreat, you know what we're going to do. They know what we're going to do well ahead of time, and they're prepared and looking forward to it. Okay, last question is, how would you design the upcoming retreat? Well, I kind of alluded to that. And I would not design the upcoming retreat alone. I would co-create it. And the way I co-create it is what I just said. I find out from them what's important to talk about. Now, how we go about talking about it, it sounds like one of the most useful designs here is something called an issue census, in the words of the OD practitioner. An issue census is the name of the intervention that I have in the back of my mind. I'm not necessarily going to say that to Denton, but what I have in the back of my mind is something called an issue census. And what that is the opportunity for those attending to bring to light the issues that they think are important, and then to sort of multi-vote. If you know what multi-voting is, it's a kind of way of prioritizing which issues that we want to talk about. And then, along with some outside activities and fun things that break the monotony, there will be times when they're sitting around having conversations. There have been times where I took people up into the Smoky Mountains, I think it was. We went to the Smoky Mountains for about 4 days. There were 17 people, a big national home builder. We went there for 4 days, 3.5 days. The weather was great and the surroundings were terrific, and we had this big place to ourselves. So I put people in small discussion groups, and there was a small, a big pond, a small lake that was about 3/4 of a mile in circumference. And I said, okay, you two go walk around the lake and talk about what you think is important to you. Bring these issues back. In that way, I'm starting to use the outside. Later on, they were playing games. I mean, these are executives that are leading a $1 billion+ company, shooting silly string at each other. You know, I mean, just fun stuff. I don't think team building wasn't important, not for a group of executives, at least not in this case. So co-create the agenda, build in some fun activities. The cocktail hours, I remember we sat around, these guys sat around. There were more men than women. I think there were 1 or 2 women, because it's a home builder and it's a little bit more male dominant. They sat outside. We're on this, it was a really nice bed and breakfast up in the Smoky Mountains. I think it was the Smokies. I think that's where we were, in North Carolina. I think it was Asheville. So I'm trying to remember all the different places we were, but it was around Asheville, North Carolina. I think we were up in the Smoky Mountains. And they had rocking chairs, big wood rocking chairs on this great big outside patio. And I think more was done after hours with these guys and their cigars. Somebody bought cigars and sitting on the patio smoking cigars and drinking scotch or whatever they were doing. And it loosened them up a little bit, and they started talking about what was really important with them. And they were all there, the men and the women, everybody was there, all of us. And that was probably one of the most productive evenings because there was no facilitation, there was no structured activity. It's allowing the group to take care of itself at some time and allowing them to be them, and at some point just dropping out of sight. You're not there to run every breath of their retreat. You're there to cause the retreat to be effective, but you're not the mama and the papa of the retreat. So that design has to be important that way. So, okay, so those are my answers, kind of elaboration on what you see in the textbook. But the case study is a good one. Oh, I left out one thing, and that I think I mentioned it earlier, and that's the fees, because they wanted a contract. And your contract, your fees would be included. They would provide travel. If you drive, they're going to pay you per mile. If you fly, they'll get you there. If depending on how far you have to fly, you might even say, I'm flying first class. I do that with some of my customers if they have me fly more than 5 or 6 hours, and certainly internationally. Your daily rate, a good OD practitioner with a master's degree, probably, I don't know, maybe $1,200, $1,300 a day. I'm guessing a little bit. PhD, you can push that up to $25,000 to $4,000 a day on the West Coast, and $5,000 to $6,000 a day on the East Coast or in big markets like Atlanta, Chicago, New York, and so on. So the fees can be pretty good. You can go out and do 2 or 3 days work, get paid $10,000, $15,000 in some cases, and come back and now have a client who's going to call you back for more help depending on what the issue census turned out. Okay, so that's my take on it. I'm trying to add a little bit of realism here and real life comments to the academic piece. But for those of you that hit on a good part of what I was saying, terrific. And let's see, I had one other closing comment, and I made this as an announcement. So, and that is that any of these case studies or any of these discussion questions that have sub-questions, like there were 4 with this Kenworth Motors case study, I look to be sure each of them are answered thoroughly. If you answer one question with one sentence and it's obviously not answering the question, it's easy to tell, then credit is lost. So take your time and answer these questions appropriately, and I think you have a lot of fun with them. So that's it. If you have any comments, just post them here. Take care, everybody.